Well, well, well. We are here again to review another game. This time, it is going to be Silent Hill F. This game just came out a couple of days ago. This was a very short experience, and I know the developers want you to play it multiple times over. They want you to complete the 4 or 5 endings. I personally am not a big fan of when games do that. I prefer having one solid ending or 2 solid endings instead of having multiple. A game has to be really phenomenal in order to get me to play through the other endings, and this game did not strike me as being amazing. I did not love this game. Did I think it was the worst experience ever? No, but it certainly wasn't the best. So let's get into it. Graphics are fantastic. This game, visually and aesthetically, was phenomenal. I thought that so many of the textures were really great. There was a lot on the screen at once. It never felt like the world was simply too empty. I thought that there were so many rich and vibrant colors and patterns and textures. I thought the graphics were fantastic. And I also thought that the aesthetic was extremely immersive. I just thought that overall this was a beautiful game. And as I always say, most games should be beautiful when they're releasing in 2025. I don't really think there is an excuse for an ugly game anymore, given the technological advancements. But I did think that there were times where the game ran poorly because there was so much going on the screen, which we'll get into the bugs in a few minutes, but the aesthetic was very immersive. I thought that 1960s Japan looked extremely cool. I thought the overworld was also very beautiful. I thought that it looked really cool. The music was good. I did not personally connect with this soundtrack the way that I did for other games like Expedition 33, Silk Song, even Elden Ring, right? I thought that there were tracks on this that did fit, but in general, I felt that it was pretty lackluster, and there was never a time where, in my opinion, the music felt intense at all, no matter what was going on. So I'm gonna go for a good. Difficulty was a pain in the neck because the game has 3 difficulties, which is story, which they claimed was a classic Silent Hill experience. Then there was hard, which they said was for veteran action game fans. And then there was Lost in the Fog, which was extremely hard. I felt that it was odd that they didn't just do easy, medium, difficult, and then you unlock Lost in the Fog later on, or having 4 difficulties at the start, because while they allow you to mix and match depending on if you want the puzzles to be hard or you want the gameplay to be on story, I felt that it was unnecessarily complicated, and I felt like it was a bit confusing even for somebody like myself who plays so many games. So I felt that the difficulty was, I'm going to put it at easy because you can play it on the journo mode, but also I felt that there wasn't that perfect middle ground. So it was either the game being too easy or the game being frustratingly tough, I suppose you could say. Now, it is a short experience, so playing it on the tougher difficulty isn't that big of a deal, but still, I felt like they didn't do a clear and concise job explaining what each difficulty was. The boss fights were okay. I liked the designs of the boss fights. I enjoyed how some of them were more blunt and brute force, and they were smashing. And then there are the other ones, like the final boss, right? That was it spinned a lot. It did a lot of AoE. I did like the boss fights, but there certainly wasn't enough. There was, to my recollection, 4 major boss fights. Now, this is a problem when you only have a game that per playthrough is only 10 hours. And again, I understand that these developers want you to play the game 4 or 5 times on New Game Plus and to get a different ending. I personally do not like when that is the mindset that a developer kind of forces you into, because generally I'm not going to play a game multiple times unless I think it is phenomenal, which I didn't think that this was phenomenal. So I'm gonna go boring because I felt like there wasn't enough and they didn't quite pack a punch. We did encounter some stutter and some lag, which was extremely annoying because it didn't happen for the first half of the game. It happened in the second half and it got really bad in the last 10%, which when the bosses are coming at you and there are several enemies on screen, it becomes extremely annoying and it gets to a point where you're taking unnecessary damage. And while I didn't think that the bugs were as extreme as some people are experiencing on a PlayStation 5, and even some people are experiencing on PC, I didn't have those major issues, but they were still there. And I do still think that it is unacceptable for there to be this level of technical problems with a full-priced AAA experience. I know that part of it is Unreal Engine 5, part of it is developers being hired who are not talented at their jobs. Either way, completely unacceptable. So I'm going to go a few bugs. The story was interesting. Now, I don't know all of the endings, and there was a lot to dissect with this game. So, of course, it is centered around Hinako. The game is really about her identity. It talks about her struggles through trauma and, I guess in part, resistance. And she's basically fighting back against society's expectations in this. And I'm not saying that it is the worst theme ever in a game. A game set in the 1960s where a woman is in part struggling with the life that she has been given. But at the same time, I felt like the message of her breaking out was not strong enough at all whatsoever, that she never truly, I feel, finds her identity. And maybe that is different in the other endings, but I didn't like that. And the plot is themed around womanhood and marriage, which again, I don't think is necessarily a bad theme to explore in a game. It could be done extremely well. But again, when you have such strong messaging of, oh, her father was an abuser and a piece of trash and he hated women and everybody is mean to her simply because she's a woman, even other women that she knows, like her sister and like her best friends, everyone is mean to her, even if it's a woman, which makes zero sense to me. And she's fighting back against these stereotypes. I just did not feel like they stuck the landing. And the theme does grow more explicit as the game progresses, but I did not like a lot of the story in this game. I just feel like it didn't quite stick the landing for me personally, and I just wish that for it being such a short experience, she would have become a stronger character earlier in the game. Because for the first half, she really and truly is just a blank slate. And if the game was 20 or 25 hours, I wouldn't mind that happening later. But because the game is so short, I felt like that pacing was really disjointed. I'm personally okay with themes of motherhood and womanhood and becoming mature. I think those are perfectly fine, but it's really truly her versus the world, and she never had a positive female figure in her life, which I felt if she even had one, it could have added so much more depth to the conversation and to the story that they were trying to tell, because she truly had nobody on her side. So I don't necessarily think that this was terrible, but I also felt like it dropped the ball, in my opinion. So I'm gonna go for all right, though a story like this has been done many other times in many better ways. And this is being generous. The gameplay definitely was okay. There were times where I thoroughly enjoyed the weapon variety. I didn't go into it expecting her to be some insanely talented fighter. I do even think that at times, like when the enemies are screaming and it's that AoE and she kind of holds her head and she's panicking, that is a really cool addition because, again, she is a younger girl who's never gone through the situation. But when she is not a strong character, I almost feel like that gets lost in translation because she gets her entire arm sliced off, no reaction. She's branded, no reaction. Why is it that one little scream is bothering her? I just wish that she was a slightly stronger character, and I felt like it would have made it quite a bit better. Frustrating at times when the game wasn't running well, and a lot of the weapons that they give you are pretty slow, and I of course leaned into that towards the end. I was using my heavy attacks a lot just because they did more damage and it's already slightly slow. But I don't quite feel like any of these scores are fully accurate. So I'm going to go, you know what? I'm going to go frustrating, but it wasn't all the time. There were moments where it was, but I wouldn't quite say it was the most fun I've ever had in a Silent Hill game, combat-wise. Quality of life was perfect. I didn't feel like it was missing anything. I didn't feel like, oh, we needed a compass or a guide or another more in-depth map. I liked the map quite a lot, actually. I thought the art style there was really pretty too. So I'm going to go perfect. Nothing to note. Game time is short. Now, I know a lot of developers try to sell you on the idea of a single playthrough is short for your convenience, in case you don't have 100 hours to dedicate to a game, but there are 5 endings, and so if you play the game 5 times, you're getting 50 hours out of your $70. I don't like that mentality. I would prefer to have 1 or 2 endings. Give me a bad ending and give me a good ending, and have them be 15 hours each or 20 hours each. Maybe even 25. I don't think that having 10 hours for a single experience is acceptable, because if I don't love a game, I'm not going to want to replay it. And so that means really I'm spending $70 for 10 hours, which is completely unacceptable. So it is short, teetering on really short, and you can draw this experience out. Though I didn't love it enough to do that, I would prefer to watch the endings on YouTube, to be honest. The price is definitely not worth it. Now, if you're buying this for $20, sure, I think that's all right. I think $20 for a game that you could potentially play 5 times over is okay. But for it being $70 or $80 or $90, depending on the edition you get, it's just not acceptable. And I do not recommend buying it for anywhere close to its full price. So wait for a sale. I think that it was an okay experience, but not for this price. Replayability, they expect you to go through several playthroughs. I personally will not be replaying it several times, though they expect it to be that. It depends on your preference. Depends if you thoroughly enjoyed your first playthrough. I personally am not gonna, play it again, at least anytime soon, so I'm going single playthrough. And the score, for me, is not extremely positive. I thought that it was gorgeous. I thought that the variety of boss fights was really cool. I did not think that this game had a wide variety of mobs. I felt like, at times, the story was a little bit too confusing. I felt like we generally stayed on track with it, though they try to throw a lot of twists and turns at you, which can be okay if done right. I personally am not the largest fan of the Silent Hill F for feminism tropes and narrative that is in this. I don't think that a game with a lead female that goes through different themes like motherhood or womanhood or marriage are bad. I think that those can be done really well. I just think that there are other games that do it significantly better. And I felt like, sure, if we played this in Japanese, maybe the narrative would have been slightly stronger. This could be an instance of it just not translating well in part, though this is what they felt was acceptable, and so I'm going to judge it based on the experience I played. I feel like with the technical difficulties, that brings it down a little bit. I didn't feel like they did this narrative in the first playthrough extremely well. That brings it down a little bit. I think that at times the combat was frustrating. Not totally, not all the time, but at times, definitely. I know that we didn't go into this expecting like some massive open world Silent Hill, right? I definitely didn't. Though I wish that there was maybe one or two more areas, because I felt like towards the end they really tried to make you feel like the game was larger with the maze house, which I thought was okay, but I definitely didn't think it was the best area I've ever experienced in a game. So, while I did not love this game, I also did not hate this game, and I think that it had some good ideas that were in part poorly executed. But I cannot give a game a higher score based on the tweaks I think they could have made to make it better. I'm staying on theme. I am giving this game a Silent Hill F is for 5. I didn't think it was the worst experience. I didn't think it was the best experience. I felt like they could have done slightly better. And while I did get a bit of enjoyment out of this, I just feel like the strange difficulties didn't help it. Some of the narrative elements not being explained fully or written well brought the score down a little bit. It was frustrating at times. Far too short per single playthrough. Certainly not worth the money. And some of those technical difficulties drove me a bit batty. I'm gonna go a 5 out of 10.